You know, Jesus was remarkable as our Savior today, but he was also a remarkable man when he came in the form of human flesh. And today we'll discuss one of those particular situations in which Jesus, in his ability and his remarkable memory and using a teaching to share a particular principle. Paul the Apostle also shared a similar principle. We call it today the principle of sowing and reaping. We find it in Galatians, the 6th chapter. And the law of sowing and reaping is something that's universal. It wasn't invented by Paul. It wasn't invented by Jesus or invented by anyone. It was from the beginning. Oh, you plant a seed, it'll grow. Is that correct? And if the seed grows, then you'll harvest the fruit. But there's three primary segments of this principle that holds true, regardless of the seed that you plant. If you plant good seed or if you plant bad seed, that will come up. So the first area of the principle is that of truth, and that's the fact that you will indeed reap what you sow. The second part of that is that you always reap in a different season than you sow. And the third is that you always, under all circumstances, you reap more than what you sow. Now, some of us perhaps have experienced blessings of the Lord. And those blessings from the Lord that occur this week or last month or whatever, perhaps you can't explain it. You say, well, God has been very good to me the last few days or the last week. And you can't explain this. And we say, well, maybe God is just blessing me over and abundantly for some reason. But perhaps that's not it at all. Maybe it's because the good seed that you planted last year or 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago is now coming up. And you are reaping the benefits of that good that you planted a number of years ago. The same can be true about the bad seed. Maybe you're having a horrible week and everything seems to be going wrong. And many times we blame it on Satan, is that the enemy is attacking me. Or maybe God is punishing me for some reason and I'm being disciplined. Well, perhaps, but maybe not. Maybe Satan has nothing to do with it. Maybe God is not punishing you. It could be that the bad seed that you planted 3 years ago now is coming up this week. Jesus used the same type of principle, and we see it in what we call the parable of the Good Samaritan. And so if you'll turn with me to the book of Luke, we'll read a portion of that. Luke, the 11th chapter. 10th chapter, I'm sorry. Luke, the 10th chapter, we'll begin to read verse number 25. And behold, a certain lawyer, other parts of the scripture, this is called doctors of the law, stood up and tempted him, meaning Jesus, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And then Jesus said to him, what's written in the law? How readest thou? And he answered and said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength, with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. And he said unto him, or Jesus said to him, Thou hast answered correctly or rightly. This do, you shall have life. But he, being willing to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? And then Jesus' answer to him is what we now call the parable of the Good Samaritan. But many of Jesus' teachings that we classify as parables were events that were based and were founded in historical truth. The event actually happened. And then Jesus used that event to emphasize a particular point. This is one of those events that actually happened. And so the parable, so to speak, parable of the Good Samaritan, is based in and founded in an event that actually took place that everybody knew about at that time. The event actually took place in the year AD 21, a few years before this time. And so Jesus used that to emphasize his points. Now, the lawyers or the doctors of the law, the Jewish doctors of the law, absolutely despised people from the Galilee, and they hated beyond comprehension people who lived in Samaria. And so Jesus wanted to emphasize a point to this man, and he did so by stating this historical event that actually happened, that which Jesus used as a teaching. And Valerius Gratius was appointed governor of Judea in the year AD 15. It was appointed by Augustus Caesar. The appointment was renewed again by Tiberius Caesar when he came to power. Now, Gratius had a nephew. His name was Spartacus. Spartacus was appointed by Gratius to be the minister of taxation. Now, the administrative headquarters for Rome, for Judea, was in the city of Caesarea Maritima. But the center of taxation, or the taxation office, and the administration of taxes was in the city of Jerusalem. And so Spartacus lived in Jerusalem as the minister of taxation, where Gratius lived in Caesarea Maritima as the governor. Now, the Roman Empire existed on taxes from the people. Some of them were very heavy taxes at times, especially under people like Emperor Caligula. Under Tiberius, it wasn't too bad, but you still had to pay taxes to Rome, and they collected these taxes. Now, all the taxes for Judea went into Jerusalem, the taxation office. But once every 40 days, the money was transferred from Jerusalem to Caesarea Maritima. Now, because it was such an important issue, then the Roman officials put out the word well in advance. Now, the reason for this was to discourage anyone from trying to rob the tax money or trying to rob the caravan. And so the word went out that on this particular day, this certain day, that the money in a military caravan would be transferred from Jerusalem to Caesarea Maritima. And that on that day, no one was allowed to travel the highway. No one. Also, all businesses that were along the route between Jerusalem and Caesarea Maritima had to close. They had to vacate the business and leave the area. If you were a resident, if you had owned a home, you lived on the road or on the side of the road and on the byways, then you also had to abandon your home for that particular day. You had to leave so that you would not be present. And like I said, the reason for this is to warn everyone that this is Rome's business, and you will be severely punished if you try to interfere with the transfer of the tax money. And so the thought and the purpose for this was well intended, and it was meant to protect the tax transfer of the money that was in the caravan. The caravan was a military caravan with a wagon with the money in it, and escorted by Roman soldiers, 20 Roman soldiers. But unfortunately for the Romans, it also notified the rebels who were in the Galilee that the tax money was being transferred. And so, knowing that this was happening, the rebels in the Galilee organized an assault and to attack the tax caravan and to steal the money. And they were successful at that. On 6 different times, the money was being transferred. The rebels attacked the caravan and were successful in stealing the money. Well, Tiberius Caesar was beside himself. He went ballistic on all of this and wanted to know what was happening. And so he made a personal visit. The only time Tiberius Caesar ever came to Judah, or in that particular area, made a personal visit to Caesarea Maritima and to talk with Governor Gratius. And he says, this has to stop. And it has to stop right now. I don't care what you have to do. I don't care the means that you have to go to get it done. But I want this tax money safe, and this violence has to stop now, immediately. So Gratius didn't know what to do or how to accomplish this. Spartacus, the minister of taxation, came up with an idea. And he says this. He said, what we'll do, and the governor approved of his plan. He said, what we will do is that we will make the announcement as we normally do. But rather than having the money in the wagon, then there will be Roman soldiers in the wagon, as well as the Roman guard. And so there was approximately a total of maybe 50 Roman soldiers by doing this, but it didn't look like it because they were hid away safely in the wagon as it was being transferred. He says, and then after it has left Jerusalem to Caesarea Maritima, then I, under the cover of night, after nightfall, I will leave Jerusalem with mules or with donkeys and behind me with the tax money. And no one will be with me. I'll just leave on my own, just as a traveler. And then I will go the back route through the wilderness of Judah and through Jericho, and then go the back route to Caesarea Maritima. And that way, the tax money will be preserved and it'll be safe. So it sounded like a good idea. So this is what the idea they put into operation. And so as normal, the announcement went out, And on that day, the road was empty. There was nobody there, and the tax money was perceived to have left Jerusalem as it always does. And they took the route to Caesarea Maritima. And as anticipated, the caravan was attacked by the Galilean rebels, and the soldiers, Roman soldiers, were there waiting for them. And not too good for the rebels, because they ended up losing the battle, and over 100 of them were killed by the Roman soldiers. The Romans lost no one. And so in that regard, it was successful on the plans. And as the rest of the plan proceeded, then once the money had, or the caravan had left Jerusalem, then Spartacus, the minister of taxation, waited until sundown, and under the cover of darkness, he did indeed leave Jerusalem with a string of mules and donkeys behind him, and carrying the tax money disguised as merchandise or something. Well, as he was traveling this back road, it's a very dangerous road, and if you ever get a chance to go to Jerusalem and see that Jericho road from Jerusalem to Jericho, you can see how difficult it would be for a person to travel that without being attacked. And it was notorious for robbers, and not the rebels that were in the Galilee, but just typical highwaymen and typical robbers. And so it was notorious for that. So as Spartacus proceeded to go to Jericho, he began to get a feeling inside that something was going to happen, an uneasy feeling. And probably all of us have experienced that one time or another, that we didn't know what was going to take place, but it just didn't feel good inside. So he stopped and hid the tax money in a location there along the road, hid it so it would be preserved, and then continued with his mules toward Jericho. He planned to spend the night in Jericho and then come back the next morning to retrieve the tax money, then continue on in the daylight to Caesarea Maritima. Just as he had hid the money, and as he was on his way continuing, he was attacked by robbers. Again, this was not the rebels of the Galilee. These were just typical low-level robbers. And he didn't have any money on him. He already securely hid that money, but he was a Roman. And he had the rings and the jewels and the necklace and the raiment that was made of silk, and all of the high-class, upper-level notoriety that a Roman official would have. And so he was a Roman by his dress and by his ornate things that he had, and by his haircut and so forth. And so the robbers beat him. He didn't have any money with him, but they did steal his rings and necklaces and so forth, took his clothes off of him, which were very valuable, and beat him up and left him to die on the side of the road. The next morning, as the sun arose, there was a Jewish priest, and this Jewish priest was his name was Jacobite, and he was passing that way, going from Jericho to Jerusalem. And as Jacobite approached Spartacus, who was laying there almost dead, he looked at him, and the principles of the priesthood said that you help those that are in need, and especially those that were not of your own race or nationality. You help them according to the law of Moses that was required. But this priest Jacobite looked at this man, and he says, he's obviously a Roman, and this man is my enemy. Certainly, Moses wasn't talking about Romans when he made these regulations concerning the priests, and even Ezra in his stipulations for priesthood said the same thing. And this priest says, surely they weren't talking about Romans, our oppressors, the ones who have us under their thumb. And he says, I know what the principles say, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to help this Roman. So he walked on towards Jerusalem on the other side of the road. Not long thereafter, there was a Levite, and this Levite was named Eleazar. And according to the law of Moses, Levites were commissioned and commanded, and they must help those that were not able to help themselves. That included those that had been injured, whether they're your enemies or your friends, or you had no idea who they were. If they were injured in any way, a Levite was commissioned by the law of Moses, demanded to stop and help. But again, Eleazar looked at this man, obviously a Roman, not realizing that it was the minister of taxation, but a Roman nonetheless, and obviously Moses wasn't talking about Romans when he wrote the principles, and so consequently he following the example of the other man, which he didn't realize what had happened. But he looked at him and says, no, I don't. I'm not going to do this. And so he walked on towards Jerusalem on the other side of the road. There's a silk trader, a silk forwarding company. And this man's name is Narcisse. He would take silk from China or from the East, and it would come into his possession. Then he would forward it on to Rome, and there it would be sold. He was fairly wealthy by doing this type of thing. His father was a Greek. His mother was a Samaritan Jew. And so he had settled in Samaria and made quite a living doing the silk business. But the Romans had taxed him mercilessly to the point that he was almost bankrupt because of the taxing, the tax obligation. Excuse me. And so he felt that the only relief that he was going to have was to somehow make an arrangement with the minister of taxation. Of course, he had never met Spartacus. He had no idea who he was, but he did know that his office was in Jerusalem. So he set an appointment many months in advance to meet with Spartacus on a particular day, which happened to be the very next day that he left Samaria to go to Jerusalem, which would have been a 2-day journey. He was going to spend the night in Jericho, and then after spending the night in Jericho, then go on to Jerusalem to meet with Spartacus the next day. And this is what he did. He went to Jericho, spent the night. Then early the next morning, he left to go to Jerusalem to arrive in enough time to have his appointment with the minister of taxation. And he was seeking some type of relief, either an installment plan to pay these taxes over time, or maybe a reduction, or something could be done, and something could be arranged to relieve himself of this immediate threat to him and his business. Otherwise, he was financially ruined. And so as he proceeded, then he too walked and saw Spartacus laying on the side of the road, not knowing who he was. And so he said, well, if I stop, then I very well may miss my appointment with the minister of taxation, and who knows when I'll get another one. And so I shouldn't do this. I should go on. There'll be other people along who will help this man, obviously, or hopefully someone will help him. And so he thought about this and weighed the circumstances. Finally, his compassion overruled. He stopped and he helped this man who is dying, this obvious Roman who was dying, which the same Roman who ruined him financially, which he didn't know it was him. But the fact that he was Roman was enough to say that these people are ruining me. They're destroying me. Why should I help him? But his compassion ruled, and he stopped and he helped him. He took him back to Jericho and put him up at a hotel, and he told the hotel keeper, when I come back, I'll pay for his expenses. I'll also pay for his upkeep and for his medical expenses. And what Narcisse did not know is that this man, it would take more than 1 year for him to recover. And so the commitment he made to the hotel people and to the officials that were there, or the owners who were there, is that he would take care of the bill. Probably he didn't expect that he was going to be running up a bill of over a year. But this is what happened. So after Spartacus was safely in the hands of the hotel owner, then he left to go to Jerusalem again to see if he at least could see the minister of taxation on that day, realizing he had missed his appointment already, but at least perhaps that day. And so he left to continue to Jerusalem. In the meantime, Spartacus made arrangements with some of the Roman officials in Jerusalem, in Jericho there, and they went and retrieved the tax money that had been buried, and they took them themselves to Caesarea Maritima. So Rome was happy that the tax money arrived, and now Spartacus was being cared for some of the local people at the hotel. When Narcisse arrived in Jerusalem, he was told that you've missed your appointment. No, the minister of taxation is out of town. I'm sorry, I don't know when he will return. Well, no, I can't make an appointment for you. I have to clear this with the minister of taxation. So, no, I don't know when you can have another appointment. So he left Jerusalem knowing that his last hope was now gone, totally and completely. He returned to Jericho and didn't do as he said. He never revealed to this man, this sick man, the arrangement he had made, but he didn't need to. And Spartacus never told him who he was, never told him his name. his position, or anything. Over the next year, Narcisse did have to file bankruptcy in the courts at Caesarea Maritima. At that time, bankruptcy took quite a number of months to come to fulfillment, and so as he waited, his business went down more and more because the tax burden was not relieved, and so he had to continue to pay the taxes. And bankruptcy had been filed, and for all practical purposes, he was financially ruined. His family was ruined, his company was ruined, and he even tried to sell the company because it was gone. In the meantime, he paid for Spartacus's upkeep in Jericho, and they developed a good friendship over the next year that Spartacus was being cared for. But Spartacus never, ever revealed his name nor his position to his newfound friend. Finally, when Spartacus was able to travel again and was healed up to a certain extent, he revealed the fact to Narcisse that I live in my family. He said, my family lives in Caesarea Maritima. Well, that didn't surprise Narcisse. He knew that this man was a Roman, and most likely he has some type of relationship to the Roman city of Caesarea Maritima. That was not a surprise to him, that he said that his family lived there. But then Spartacus said, I'd like to introduce you to my family for the goodwill that you have done for me. And so he said, why don't you come to Caesarea Maritima with me so I can introduce you? Narcisse says, well, I'd love to. I can't. I don't have any money. And so let's just make a rain check on this, and another time we'll do it. But after much persuasion, then Narcisse was convinced, okay, well, I'll make the trip with you. So they entered Caesarea Maritima, the two of them, and finally they went to the palace of the governor of Gratius, and which was quite surprising to Narcisse. Why are we going to the Roman administration palace, and why are we going to this place? And it was at that time that Spartacus finally revealed who he really was. He said, Narcisse, my friend, I, and Spartacus, I am the minister of taxation that you had an appointment with. And after missing that appointment, then you were financially ruined. But I am the man, your devout enemy, who you helped anyway. So they appeared before the governor, Governor Gratius. And the governor of Judea was quite taken back by Narcissus' compassion when he didn't have to be, his own personal sacrifice when he didn't have to do it. And he made a proclamation, and that proclamation was established at that time and even became recognized by Tiberius Caesar himself. And in this proclamation he says this, from this day forward, your bankruptcy has stopped. You will no longer be bankrupt. And also, from this day forward, your taxes have been satisfied. You owe no taxes to the Roman government, nor will you ever, for the remainder of your life, ever have to pay taxes to the Roman government. And not only this, but your children will never have to pay taxes, nor your legacy, nor your ancestors, for as long as they live. And beginning today, we of the court of Caesarea Maritima, as well as the courts of other of the Roman officials throughout the East, and even Rome itself, we will buy our silk exclusively from you from this time forward. Needless to say, Narcisse was quite surprised. But that's not the end of the story, because that particular proclamation was recognized by the emperor of Tiberius, as well as Caligula, as well as Claudius, as well as Nero, throughout the entire history of the Roman Empire. That was recognized. It was also recognized by the Persian rulers who came after the Romans, and then recognized by the Arab rulers, recognized again by the Ottoman Turks, even recognized by the British when they controlled the region. Finally, there were no longer any ancestors of Narcisse, and they came to an end, and the people who were running the company at that time, they had moved their company from Samaria to Joppa, which is present-day Tel Aviv. And they said, we'll sell the business, we'll go out of business. And they sold the business for a very healthy sum. And the entire family were extremely wealthy from that time, of the time of that Narcisse helped Spartacus until the time it went out of business. But the Narcisse Silk Company remained in business until the year 1917, reaping the benefits of one man planting one seed on one day when he didn't have to. The crop will come up when the seed is planted. You will not harvest that crop the same day that you plant it. You may not harvest it again for another week. You may not harvest it for a month. You may not harvest it for 10 years, 15 years. But it will come up, and you will harvest that crop. And the same goes for the good as well as the bad. As we said previously, Narcisse didn't have to do this. He could have thought about his own welfare, his own financial welfare, his own family welfare. But he chose instead to listen to a heart of compassion when he didn't have to help a man who is obviously his enemy. And as a result, he reaped the benefits for more than 1,900 years. What is going to be the result of your seed that you plant today? The seed of anger, the seed of contempt, the seed of bitterness, it will come up. It may not come up next week or next year or the next 10 years, but it will come up. And you will reap bitterness and discontent and hatred toward yourself far greater than you planted on this day. But what about the good seed? Those of you who placed your tithes in the offering. The good that you do for someone once you leave this building. The kind word that you say. The compassion that you have for the street people or those that are invisible. That will come up. And that good seed you will reap. And the harvest will be far greater than anything you ever possibly begin to imagine. And so the law of sowing and reaping is universal. Jesus didn't invent it other than through creation. But when this man chose to help his enemy, then he reaped the benefits of the natural law, the universal law of sowing and reaping. And you can do the very same thing in your life today.